I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the final stretch. We're starting off this morning with a retailer panel, and I'm just going to talk for a while and hoping that if people hear the voice coming from inside, they'll gravitate and get seated. So this is always one of my favorite parts of the show because we talk about retailers, and that's who I work with most of the time. And today we've got a couple of guys with us who work, do hand-to-hand combat, guerrilla warfare, whatever, with guys who own gas stations, and talk to them about things like E15 and E85 and probably equipment that they think they can't use and that sort of thing. So first of all, though, one of the things that we do each year is give an award for helping us retail more ethanol. The award is the Paul Dana Marketing Vision Award, and Paul Dana was a IndyCar driver who brought the ethanol industry together, got him to put together a group and got the Indy Racing League to add ethanol to their fuel, or to basically have ethanol as their fuel. And he died in a crash in 2006, so it's been 20 years, which I saw that today when I was looking at it. I can't believe it's been that long, but he was able to unite the industry in a way that really, I don't know if it's happened since then, but it was also a great way to show the qualities that ethanol has to people who are concerned about performance. So we named this award after them, and this year we are proud to present it to the Minnesota Biofuels Association for their work in promoting E15. Go ahead. So a couple of people wanted to clap pretty good. So Brian Werner is here to accept it on their behalf, and they're getting the award because sometimes I'm critical of advertising and things like that, but I think one of the things that we have to do with E15 is to, in addition to getting out to explaining it to retailers, which is what I'm sure you have to do, be able to answer questions, because people don't wake up in the morning and say, damn, I got to go out and buy gas. I got to go buy something for my car. But they do sit at the pump and wonder if they can use something that looks like a good deal even. And I think that's one of the things that has been impressive about the way Minnesota Biofuels Association has promoted ethanol, going out doing pump promotions, talking to people, just going out there putting a discount on it because people love a low price even though it's cheap already, but going out there and talking to consumers and answering their questions, explaining to them what this stuff is. And as a result, they've increased their E15 sales from almost nothing to 135 million?
144 as of last year.
Okay, 144 million in just a few years. So I guess I can present you with this Paul Dana Marketing Vision Award. So we'll do that.
Well, thank you, Ron. Thanks, Brian, Troy, the entire ACE board for this award. This on behalf of our board of directors and our staff, we're honored to accept this award, and I promise we'll display it in a very prominent location in our office. Good. And point it out to everybody aggressively when they come visit.
Good. So that's why we give the award.
But seriously, the recognition today is really more important than the award itself. It's an acknowledgement that others in the industry are recognizing that we're doing something successfully here in Minnesota, and that means more than the physical award. So, but like any good executive director would tell you, all of our successes are because of our staff, and all of our failures are because of me alone. So in this case, I'm really pleased to note that the reason we're receiving this award is because of the many years of work that our marketing director, Greg Gust, has put in, driving around Minnesota, building relationships, crunching the data, identifying ways to increase the number of E15 gallons sold in the state. So Greg, you want to come up here a second? I'm going to give you this award, actually. Come on. So, thank you, Greg, for all the work you do for us and for, all the efforts that led to this award. So, yeah, of course.
All right, so now we're going to start our panel discussion. And Brian, we're going to go first with him. I was reading his bio earlier. I know I only became familiar with him when he was working for Senator Klobuchar and doing some great work for us in her office. And then I just read his bio, found out he worked for Tim Johnson, just like Brian did. So I didn't know that before. So he's going to talk to us about the thing that we just awarded Minnesota Biofuels for and a couple other things. And at the end of their remarks, we'll open up the mics and get a bunch of questions after I ask too many. And then, so have your questions prepared, and go ahead, Brian, take it away.
Great. All right. Many of you might be already familiar with the Minnesota Biofuels Association, but for those who are not, we are a nonprofit trade association representing ethanol producers here in Minnesota, founded in 2011. Our most recent, there's kind of the map of the ethanol plants in the state, 9 of them. I know a lot of them are here in this room today, whether it's board members for Alcorn, CVEC, Granite Falls, and also High Water Ethanol and Lamberton are members of ACE. So thank them. I thank them for all of their support of the association. When we last updated our strategic plan, we kind of identified 4 major pillars. And I think retail fuel marketing is really a sweet spot because it touches upon each one of those pillars. So while supportive public policy and proactive consumer education have been critical in expanding E15 access in Minnesota, I believe that the secret to our success here has been partnerships, collaboration, and above all else, simply pounding the pavement. So we realized at the very beginning that expanding markets for higher blends of ethanol meant working directly with fuel retailers that sell fuel. That means investing in dedicated staff to do outreach in the field. It means developing relationships with retail station owners, equipment suppliers, and bureaucrats implementing cost-share programs both federally and at the state level. And it was also understanding that these station owners need to know how installing new E15 infrastructure would impact their bottom lines, and it meant connecting them to federal and state grant opportunities to reduce their financial burden and walk them through the boring details about how to fill out federal grant applications and state grant applications. It also meant Greg having a stack of orange E15 stickers in his car so that when he goes out to retailers when they need a new sticker, we have that available for them. But mostly it meant recognizing that E15 expansion was not going to happen overnight and without sweat equity from the ethanol industry, or oftentimes showing up in really uncomfortable places like maybe one of those gas stations that's in a bad neighborhood that you don't really feel comfortable going to. Well, we went to those stations. So as a result of those efforts over the last decade, E15 retail locations and sales in the state of Minnesota have increased dramatically, resulting in positive benefits and impacts on Minnesota's consumers, environment, and our economy. So we work closely with the Minnesota Department of Commerce to track the number of gallons of E15 sold on a monthly and an annual basis. We're one of only 2 states in the entire country, Iowa being the other, to actually track that data. And we've gone from 84 retailers and 3.1 million gallons in 2015 to 544 and 144.5 million gallons last year. And despite a dip during the pandemic when consumers were using less fuel, we still managed to expand the number of retail locations by 5% from 2019 to 2020. And according to the most recent numbers, we've added another 12 stations so far this year and are approaching a saturation point of nearly 1/4 of all stations in the state offering E15. And as that number continually creeps higher, it encourages more competition in the fuel marketplace with a clear message: offer E15 or get priced out by those who do. And so during a time when the average price per gallon of fuel nationally is above $4 a gallon. The ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz continues constraining global oil supplies. The price advantage between E10 and E15 is more important than ever. So we published a study in January with DIS that showed that consumers in Minnesota have saved nearly $80 million since 2013 by filling up with E15 at the pump. And cumulative savings projected out till 2030 would exceed $272 million. So we're all familiar with the phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So for many of us, it seems obvious that consumers are frustrated with high gas prices and E15's more affordable. But if you look at polling that we did this summer, just over 2 in 5, or 42% of Minnesotans have ever purchased E15, and only 17% actually buy it regularly. And that's largely because fewer than half of Minnesotans believe that their vehicle can use E15, and 29% would say that it cannot. So that kind of leads us to 4 major takeaways. Ethanol's ceiling is information, not opposition. So although most Minnesotans do not have an unfavorable view of ethanol, we open up at about majority favorability. There's a lot more people who just don't know about ethanol and don't know about E15. So while it can oftentimes we get caught up in the debates with every opponent that writes an op-ed against ethanol in the newspaper, we actually found that less than 25% of Minnesotans actually hold an unfavorable view of ethanol. And also we found that information moves people. Messages we're all familiar with: affordability, support for farmers, fewer emissions, homegrown energy independence, choice at the pump, economic growth. Those all resonate with the public across party lines and improve opinions of ethanol. Our vulnerabilities are mechanical, not moral. The 2 arguments that work against E15 at the pump are poor gas mileage and engine damage, which we all know those 2 things are not true, but those are the 2 most effective arguments against us. So while oftentimes we get bogged down in debates about indirect land use change or food versus fuel, most Minnesotans just want to know, can my car use E15 and will it reduce my gas mileage? And so we need to lead with safety assurances and price advantages. So an important part of our work as an association is to increase the public's understanding of biofuel. So we take those principles and messages and we bring them directly to the public through advertising, promotional events, social media, and educational materials. We host dozens of in-person grassroots events at retail gas stations every summer and directly interact with consumers. We distribute pamphlets, T-shirts, prizes, and to date, our success rate of convincing drivers at those events to try E15 is around 60 to 65%. If you've stopped at a Quick Trip in the state of Minnesota this summer, you've likely seen our television ad that plays on the television screens there at the pump with a mechanic noting that, yes, any car 2001 and newer is approved by the EPA for E15. And then lastly, this summer and last summer, we've been running a Take a Pic and Win campaign, asking consumers to take photos of the gas pump when they notice that there's 87 and 88 are being offered. And we basically ask them to send us photos and tell us where in the state they are seeing that price difference. And at the end of each month, we do a drawing and give them a gift card. But this is great because it offers us real-time information and real-time data about areas in the state where the E15 price gap, and it kind of gives us this kind of perfect, visual of, look, here's the savings that consumers could be having. And actually, at one pump this summer, we got up to 64 cents in savings. And so hopefully that's a reminder to those folks who are taking those photos that, hey, I could really be saving some money with this. So I'll just finish by noting that we continue to work on policy at a state level. to complement the work we're doing on the ground at a grassroots level. We work directly with Governor Walz to secure Minnesota's ongoing participation in the Midwest E15 waiver this year. We secured $4.7 million for this fiscal year in state biofuel infrastructure grant funding. And we've also secured a commitment from our state fire marshal to streamline compatibility requirements for E10 pumps so that they can distribute E15. We know that states surrounding us not only have biofuel infrastructure programs, but they also provide volumetric incentives and require large retailers to provide access to E15. So during our last legislative session, we introduced legislation to keep pace with our neighbors, and we look forward to working with the new legislature and our new governor here in 2027 to make sure that we have the full suite of E15 incentives and standards going forward. So in closing, I'll just say I always remind people that Minnesota is a leader on renewable fuels. Whether it's the Minnesota model, we were the first state to require 10% ethanol blends in gasoline. And in roughly 10 years, we went from one gas station selling E15 in 2013 to over 550 stations today. And so our combined marketing efforts are a key part of that story, but there's still work to be done. And that's where we need all of your help. So when I started this job, none of my immediate family members knew anything about E15. They didn't even know that right now when you fill up with regular 87 at the gas station, that there's 10% ethanol in that. So, and today, after 4 years of doing this job, now they all seek out E15 at the pump, mostly because they know that I'll chastise them if they don't. But my mom is also trading in her Audi this year because the manual says to only use premium. So we need your help. Do you fill up with E15 every time you go to the station? Do you tell your family members to fill up with E15 every time they go to the station? When you're filling up with E15, if you see somebody who's not, do you ask them, hey, you could save 10, 15, 20, 30, 64 cents by filling up with E15? So one of the things we do is on our website, minnesotabiofuels.org, we have a biofuel station locator map where you can put in, you can choose E15, E20, E30, E85, and you can directly see, and it'll give you directions to a station where you can fill up with E15. So, please visit the website. We've got an app that you can download on your phone that'll give you directions, and so we need your help to get the word out. So again, thanks for the award. Thanks for the invite to join today, and thanks for your support of the Minnesota Biofuels Association.
Great, thank you. So, thank you. And I saw that map. I was in Maple Grove for a wedding the other day and found an E30 station using that thing. I didn't realize you had some of those around. But our next speaker is Jeff Wilkerson with Pearson Fuels. Jeff originally met Jeff when he was in Nebraska, and he's gone on to California and has the probably the hardest job in the world because he gets to deal with California policy making. But his company is probably the leader they're the leader in selling E85 nationwide. And one of the things that we constantly talk to people about is E15 is going to be huge volume. But while we're trying to get there, let's not forget about E85. And there's nobody that will no company that will help you remember what value E85 is than Pearson Fuels. So if you want to go ahead and show everybody what you got to show.
Yeah, sure, and thank you for the invitation to speak. I appreciate it. Ron is at least partly responsible for me no longer having to spend winters in Nebraska.
There is that.
When I was at the Nebraska Corn Board, we were looking for stations who would offer E85 and E15, and that was 2019, 2020, and slamming my head against the wall trying to give out $50,000 at a time and thought there has to be an easier way to do this. Nebraska sends a lot of ethanol into California, so does Iowa, Kansas, other states as well. And so Ron introduced me to a guy named Greg Jones at Pearson Fuels who does station development. And we worked out a grant arrangement where we would provide funding to stations who would offer E85 there, and that's continued now for 5 or 6 years. So if you're from Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, Kansas, thank your corn growers for the money that's flowing in, and I'll show you the pretty drastic growth we've had in California since that time. But just as background, Pearson Fuels is an E85 distributor in California. We only do E85. That's all we do. We have 500 sites that we work with. The map there, you can see stations in blue that are open and stations in orange that are coming soon. We opened 69 sites in 2025. That was a record for us. I think we'll be somewhere around 69 to 70 this year as well. Part of that is coming from high gas prices, but a lot of it is coming from grant funding to help station owners flip tanks to offer E85 from corn growers in the Midwest, and also from some USDA funding from the latest round of HPIP, which was a total nightmare to implement in California with environmental regulations. So that was not that much fun, and if they don't do it again, I think we'd be okay with that. E85 in California contains maximum ethanol percentage of 83%, and that's a big reason why we're able to account for so much pure ethanol sales in California. If you contain 83% ethanol and minimum gasoline content, you're exempt from the state excise tax. We'll get into some of those fees later on. But an increasing share of our E85 is also made with ethanol and renewable naphtha. So renewable naphtha is a byproduct of renewable diesel and SAF production. More of that is coming online. And I think what the refiners would say, the annoying byproduct is renewable naphtha. There's not much you can do with it. The octane is all over the board. The quality is really spotty. But a great use for it is E85 because we can offset that lower octane quality. So we get a lot of renewable naphtha that we use. It's also beneficial for us in California because of the low carbon fuel standard that rewards cleaner fuels and punishes gasoline. And it's going to become more important with some new cap and trade legislation or regulations that were recently passed as well. Just a brief overview of California. So 13.2 billion gallons of gasoline in 2025, 1.4 billion gallons of ethanol. So that blend rate is above 10% thanks to E85. There is only E85 and E10 currently in California. Nothing in between and nothing below. The first trip we took out to California, we took some corn growers out there and we were showing them a dispenser and it's just E10, and one of the growers said, well, where's the lawnmower gas? And I said, you could argue that the E10 is the lawnmower gas. We eliminate that problem pretty quickly. We don't offer you E0. But it is an energy island, and it's something that has really accelerated the fear in California about the transition to electric vehicles and how challenging that has become. We have or had, depending on which administration you're listening to, a requirement that all vehicles need to be EV or zero emission by 2035. The federal administration has now revoked that, and perhaps the ability for any tailpipe emissions whatsoever, which has made it really challenging to figure out what automakers should produce not only for the U.S. but for California as well. There are 7 in-state oil refineries. We had 9 just a few years ago. We're down to 7. I think it's likely that we'll lose at least another one by 2030. There is talk of an oil pipeline coming in from, I think, St. Louis down to Texas, through Arizona, and up into California. You know, that would help. It would probably eliminate some of the price spikes that we see in California, but then you put pressure on the in-state refineries, and so you probably reach natural equilibrium somewhere in there. The important point about the refineries, too, is they're separated. So there's refineries in the Bay Area, there are refineries in LA, there's nothing in between, and there are no pipelines that get you from north to south. So if you have a problem in Martinez, California, up in the Bay Area, prices spike in Northern California, and it takes a while for that to come down south to LA. There is some refining capacity, or at least some oil production in Kern County in the Central Valley of California that pipes into the Bay Area as well, but most of the oil that we use in California comes from overseas. So 61% of the oil comes from outside the U.S. We do get a good chunk from Alaska. The Jones Act has actually helped California quite a bit. We're getting some supplies from the Gulf as well, and that's probably helped keep some price spikes down. This chart is pretty indicative of what my mood is like on a day-to-day basis. So you look at 2025, that was not a fun year. Things were fine, but it was not as exciting as we're used to seeing E85 in California. You know, I mentioned Ron and I first met in 2020, 2021 when this was a 40 million gallon market. That's when the state corn growers started investing money in, and I think this year we're going to be at 140 million gallons. So we've added 100 million gallons of E85 demand in California. What's the upper limit? I don't know. We have about 1.1 million flex fuel vehicles on the road. We're working on legislation, fresh off defeat last week. Thank you very much. Wounds are still fresh for E85 conversion kits in California. That I think is a real possibility and would make a big difference. But we've seen dramatic increases in California due to two things. The first is station expansion. We have about 650 sites throughout California that offer E85 now. So we're a large player. We're not the only player. There are a few others as well. But gas prices have been a big reason why we've been able to increase E85 sales. So you look at that slight dip during COVID, that was the only decrease up until 24, 25 when gas prices were relatively in check. The highest gas price in California was in 2023. We reached $6.29 a gallon. That put a lot of fear in legislators, rightfully so, and it made a big impact on their desire to find a cheaper solution or at least ways around these price spikes. So there are a number of things that they've tried. We'll talk about some of the policy initiatives later on. But last year, you look at that dip down to 110 million gallons last year. E85 in California operates under what's called a test program. So every station is supposed to have a memorandum of exemption and report gallons to the Air Resources Board. We think that there are some smaller operators who are probably not reporting those gallons. So I think last year we're probably more like 120 million gallons, but this year we'll see a pretty dramatic increase to 140. All due to the price and station expansion. I hope you can see it, but we're looking at $3 a gallon for a price difference. This is pictures from March, April, May, June, July, all across the board. There's a big difference in California between branded retail and unbranded retail. That top middle picture is an unbranded, so you can see the gas price is below $6 a gallon. Chevron, pretty typically above $6 a gallon when we get into those price spikes. So offers you a pretty good educational opportunity for consumers. You pull up to the pump and you see something that's $3 per gallon cheaper. It does a lot of the education for us, right? And we've had a lot of good media opportunities this year as well. Usually something like, there's something cheaper at the pump. What is it? Nobody knows.
Can I use it?
And so we have to talk about what flex fuel is again. The newer models that we're seeing, the Chevy Trax, the Buick Envista, they've taken off that flex fuel decal on the back. They've taken off the yellow ring. They've taken off the yellow gas cap. All that's there now is a sticker that says E85/gasoline. Oh. If you don't know what you're looking for, you wouldn't see it. In fact, when we bought our Chevy Trax for some testing that we did and company use, we said we're buying this because it's flex fuel. And the salesman said, no, they don't make that anymore. They said, no, this vehicle's flex fuel. Oh, well, you can't get it. And I said, that station right across the road has it. Oh. And so he went and filled the vehicle, came back. I said, did you use E85? No, they didn't have it. And I said, well, you have to look for it because we don't have it on every dispenser. You look for the yellow nozzle. So there's still a huge education component in California, even with that price spread. But it does take a lot of the work out of it when you see that $3 delta. Ron mentioned the big difference in pure ethanol that we can move through E85. So this is pure incremental demand or incremental consumption of ethanol in California versus E15 in the rest of the country. Okay, so at 110 million gallons times 0.73 versus 1.5 billion gallons of E15, which is probably aggressive, times 0.05, we're still well above E15. This year, I think we'll reach 100 million gallons of incremental demand. So that's great, and I think we're still increasing. I'll go to the price spread here, and I'll just note that in March, this is E85 versus California gasoline, all grades, all formulations, weighted average. In March of this year, we moved our price to a weighted average as well, but the red checkered line there at 70%, that's where we want to be. So rarely are we ever not the economical option in California. I'll show you why in a bit, but this year is outstanding. You know, in 2022, 2023, when gasoline was above $6 a gallon, we didn't have RINs at $1.60 to $2.20. Ethanol was a little bit more expensive. So this is unlike anything we've seen in California before. I mentioned 24 and 25 weren't as much fun. There wasn't a month where we were above $5 a gallon, I think, in California for gasoline. So that wasn't that much fun. This is the reason why we're really able to take advantage. So this is the gasoline breakdown of costs and fees for a gallon of gasoline. May 2026, $5.95, really good price. We like that. I'll draw your attention to a few things. State excise tax is 61 cents a gallon. It actually moved up to 63 in July. But E85 does not face the 61 cents, so that's a big advantage for us. And then there are two other fees that make a big difference to gasoline as well. One is the low carbon fuel standard. We're probably somewhere around 22 cents a gallon for that now. You know, if you're ethanol, you try to come in right at the line so you don't have that 19 cents a gallon penalty. And then cap and trade, which ethanol is not subject to either since it's a fuel with biogenic emissions. So there's 23 cents a gallon that doesn't impact our fuel as well. And we would expect over time that those LCFS and cap and trade numbers get more expensive due to the intensity targets that keep ratcheting up. Obviously, there is political pressure to do anything on gas prices. So the things that are keeping a lid on those two fees are the possibilities of a repeal or watering down of the intensity targets as well. And then in California, obviously, you saw Tom's presentation yesterday. The margins are insane for refining and at the retail level. You can do really well as a retailer in California, but it's expensive, right? I mean, you're talking $9-10 million for a retail sector. Right. All right, some quick policy things. AB 2046 was the bill that would allow E85 conversion kits to be sold and installed in California. CARB has its own regulation, totally unworkable. This bill died in Senate Appropriations last week. Spent a lot of time on it this year. It died on the suspense file. Really nasty process in California where you don't even present the bill. You're just told on a day if you make it through or not. And so that was unfortunate. That was a difficult day. But we're going to try and run it again next year. I think there's every intention from the groups involved that there is something to be had there. We didn't record a single no vote throughout the entire way. Oh, wow. That would probably indicate to us that we know who killed it and where. E85 spec from CARB is going to be finalized at some point in the near future. They're talking about two different specs. That would eliminate the test program, the memorandum of exemption that we currently work with in California. So I think we're okay with it. You never know when you work with CARB. You want to see it in writing first. But we've had conversations with them that have been productive. And then the E15 adventure that California has faced, I think we're getting to the end of it. There's a bill, I think, approaching the floor next week that will do some cleanup on the original E15 bill that just allowed the sale of it. Unfortunately, it didn't address some of the equipment issues, so this bill would clean up some of those equipment issues. There are still some things at the state fire marshal level that would need to be completed by the end of the year, and then CARB has to do its own rulemaking. So this is to say, it's a nightmare. Yep. Okay, California is really tough, and they make you jump through a lot of different hoops. I will urge caution on E15, how quickly it's going to enter the marketplace, and the number of gallons that we're going to see out there. I mentioned California is largely a branded market, so if you can't convince Chevron or ARCO to offer E15, that's probably 60% of the market right there. And the hypermarkets are a huge chunk. So Costco. Hypermarkets make up 21%, something like 20% of gasoline demand in California. So they're a huge player as well. and then you have the equipment below ground as well. So anytime we flip a tank for E85, you'd have to flip that same tank for E15. So there's still work that you have to do, and that's a $300,000-$400,000 project once you break concrete in California. I mentioned LCFS and cap and trade, and then just finishing up, there's been legislation in the past few years to address price gouging, both at the refiner level, and now it's kind of creeping down into the retail level. So there's a bill this year, I think it's SB 493, that would limit you during times of war to a profit of 10%. Okay, that's a pretty narrow margin for some of these refiners that operate in California. So we'll see if that makes it off the floor and onto the governor's desk. But I'll stop there, Ron, because I know I went a little bit long. And
Great. Well, we have a few, about 10 minutes for questions here. You already answered one of mine because my first one was, instead of going through all the details, when is E15 going to be a reality in California? And you just told me later.
Well, I think there's a possibility that you could see the first station before the end of this year.
Oh, really?
Most likely, you're probably looking at early 2027. Okay. But, again, just be cautious about the demand that you're seeing out there. We could do, if we did 10,000 gallons a month at an E85 site, which would be a really disappointing site for us.
You guys, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be like 7,300 gallons of pure ethanol, right? Incremental demand. Yep. In order to beat that, we would have to do 150,000 gallons of E15 a month, which isn't impossible, but I think the average is probably something around 80,000 gallons a month.
You guys, 80,000 is a typical.
Gasoline would be normal. So it's going to take time to reach some of those levels that you've been seeing.
Yeah, and I mean, Jeff and I are part of a group that meets on this every once in a while to talk about those things, and it is amazing just the levels of bureaucracy that are out there. The bill you're talking about, which I'm glad you said something about, is that got an urgency thing attached to it like the first one did?
Yeah, it does, and I think it's been blessed from above, so that always helps in California. But then there are some things that you still have to clean up after that.
Okay,
which is
what we found out with the first one. It was passed with what they call an urgency statute, which meant you could start selling it right now while the testing gets done. And then they found out there's other people who need to do other testing. So it's always kind of an adventure to go through there. One of the things that you sent me a while back, and one of my current things that I start to rant about a little bit, is how E85 is being priced around here. I think there's been more people pointing it out to more retailers because it's come down. But, we've seen $3 for E85 here. And you sent me a text a while back showing the prices, because you've got your map and it shows the prices on it. What kind of, I know there must have been some kind of competitive battle going on, but tell them what the prices were in California for E85.
Yeah, I think at that time so there's an area of the Inland Empire where we had a cluster of stations who were in a price war of some kind. I think it was under $2 a gallon there at that time. I think it's $2.09 now.
So $4 below gas.
Yeah, so they're doing massive volume through those stations, which is great. I think the cheapest stations we have now are around $1.99. I think a good price would be $2.59, $2.69, $2.79 in there would be a great price, and I'm not sure you're going to see a difference unless you have competitors down the street. So we haven't reached saturation yet in California. I don't know what that number is. We have roughly 10,000 gas stations across California, so we're approaching 10% of sites that have E85. That's a pretty good level.
Yeah, it's great.
But we do need to increase the competition because we do have retailers that are setting at $3.99 and not moving.
Okay.
And we've had some success where we open a station down the street, and all of a sudden you drop that by about $1 a gallon, and they realize, wow, I didn't know the demand was there.
And you mentioned how many flex fuel vehicles are in the state. That's the only people who use E85, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I think when you see those pictures, there's some creative fueling going on.
Yeah.
I think there are some things happening that, the state doesn't do it. The people kind of take it into their own hands and blend and mix. We don't have misfueling issues that come up to us. Anytime we have it, there was one a year or two ago where someone put E85 in and he said it ruined my car, and so we went back and we pulled the surveillance footage and he had put diesel in his car. So that'll do it. But
that doesn't help.
Yeah, that doesn't help. So, but usually, no, we don't see issues with misfueling there.
So, Brian, you guys, with these promotions that you do, some of them are stations, but you do some other ones that are, I know we did some, like a Minnesota-Nebraska game that you guys did. What other kinds of promotions are you doing to get that information out there?
Yeah, so it's mostly the grassroots events, but we do all kinds of things here during the summertime. So we're going to be, the Minnesota State Fair opens up here this next Thursday, and the first weekend is always, the most highly attended of the entire fair. And we, through some partnerships that we have with the Hubbard Broadcasting kind of empire here in Minnesota, are going to have a table at the State Fair on the first Saturday of the fair, and we're going to be out there handing out. We printed up these great T-shirts that they're kind of like a faux jersey kind of a thing, and on the back, they're branded with University of Minnesota on the front, and then on the back they say unleaded 88. So we're going to be handing those out to folks at the State Fair, handing them out pamphlets, just talking to them about, hey, you're worried about gas prices?
Yeah.
Here's an option for you. So it's those kind of things, and we've also partnered with Gopher Athletics to do some things where we're going to have some tables and some booths out in front of the stadium during football games here this fall. So
good.
Hopefully the Gophers will be good. So.
Yeah. We got the microphones here if anybody's got a question or two or either of these guys.
So I live down by New Ulm, and there's 2 quick trips in New Ulm. There's 2 in St. Peter. I think there's 6 in Mankato. And usually it's only 10 cents advantage on E15. But sometimes it's 40. What if we would give those guys some big award and maybe they would cut the price a little bit?
Well, I hate to tell you, they've gotten the Paul Dana Award before, but and that was actually because they were putting E85 in a lot of stations. I will say this. The price differential cost-wise with E15 has been, most of the time the last couple of years, it's been 2 cents, 5 cents wholesale. Most of the differential that you see on the sign isn't because the cost is lower. It's because when they put E15 in, they raise their E10 price because they want most of their people to buy the stuff that costs the least. So the 15-cent gap isn't real from a cost standpoint. However, now, and this is what Brian's talking about, getting out there to talk to the marketers, it is 15 cents, it's 19 cents, it's 20 cents. So we have an opportunity right now and need to have, everybody out there, like you mentioned, talking about it. But usually the cost differential doesn't match what you see on the sign. And I think that, I know that's in the markets that I've spent a lot of time in. You guys have been doing a good enough job. I don't really come here that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been. You've seen those price caps increase, and I think that's been really helpful for us when we go out and talk to consumers. Is, most consumers when they come in, they're used to grabbing the same nozzle. So when we can get them before they do that and point out the price difference, it's really been helpful.
Well, great. I guess we're right up at time, and so let's give these guys a round of applause, and then Brian will introduce our next speaker. You got the clicker? Give her.